Thank you everyone. Welcome. Last session before lunch, and it's a bit of a late lunch, so we're going to have as much energy as we can. I'm going to be looking to come to the audience with lots of questions, and I promise I'm going to put all of my energy into this, and I know that my friend and colleague Paul Hender will be doing the same, because some of you may not know, but Paul and I have worked together for over 18 years when we ran a business called Metrica. And here we are back in about 2000, and we've done many presentations, normally trying to sell our services, and amazingly some people actually bought from us. But here we are about 18 years ago. Paul and I sold the company, and it became part of Gorkana and Alcision, and Paul, of course, is still there. I stayed with that project for about 4 years and then moved on. So I'm going to talk a little bit about about the framework, how we got to the framework, set some context about why it's important, show it to you, tell you a bit about some of the innovations that we've launched today, and then Paul's going to give us a couple of great case studies which are going to show you how you can use it. So first of all, how we got here, and we've seen some of these slides earlier in the day, but you remember we had those AMEC milestones in the first session, and back in 2010 we had the Barcelona principles, and perhaps you heard me mention this earlier today, that these are a 30,000-foot view on what you should do, but not how do I do it. And that was one of the really big criticisms, and I appreciate that not everyone will know what the Barcelona principles are. They're slightly windy. So here is my shortened version of what they are. These are the principles of what good measurement looks like. So it's critical that we plan and set targets ahead of measurement. If you look down to the third one, that we link that to the organisational objectives. That our measurement should focus not just on the outputs, but on outtakes and outcomes as well. That we don't just count stuff in a quantitative way, but we look at qualitative measurement as well. The famous one, advertising values are not the value of PR, that they're an invalid metric. It's here as a principle which we need that's why we're developing that one further, to help people finally get rid of them. That measurement should be integrated, and that social media particularly shouldn't sit in some kind of silo, but should be measured holistically with the rest of the communications. And I think really importantly, that all of our measurement needs to be transparent, consistent, and valid. It has to be replicable. It has to make sense. We can't confuse our clients. And for those of you who are interested in reading more about the Barcelona principles, I've put a link in the bottom right there, which will be in the slides at the end, to the resource page on AMEC's homepage, where you can read all about them. But that's them in a nutshell. And so then we've seen this slide already. So we developed the principles. We created, first of all, a valid metrics framework in 2011, then separate social media measurement frameworks, then user guides. We refreshed the Barcelona principles, and last year we launched the integrated evaluation framework, which is what we're here to talk about today, and how it's moved forward. And that was to replace all the other frameworks to give you one framework that works for integrated communications, that's appropriate for the way that communicators, PR professionals are operating today, to allow us to talk to them at a level that they appreciate, and makes us the credible consultants that they're looking for. The framework was launched in the context of some challenges. Of course, we all know about digital and social media, and many people felt that because media now was so digital, wasn't it much easier to measure? Because so much stuff can be done in real time and automated and counted. And we saw a big influx of the software as a service type companies backed by venture capital coming into our marketplace and launching portals and dashboards. And there are hundreds of these companies. There's the big ones, there's small ones, there's new ones starting on a daily basis, launching automated real-time portals, dashboards, and charts. But the risk is that just as we're establishing principles on what good measurement looks like, and that we need to do all those great things the Barcelona principles told us, that people fall back to saying, well, these charts, because they're charts, surely they're measuring my communication and they're good enough. But the danger is, as Jim mentioned earlier, just because it counts doesn't mean we should count it. We shouldn't just count stuff for the sake of counting. We need to measure the stuff, if we're going to prove effectiveness, that actually matters. And these charts often are not counting the things that we need them to. So it's not only that they're not necessarily choosing the right thing, but what's made the situation even worse more recently is that many of the numbers and the metrics that we have counted on for years are suddenly being shown to be not trustworthy, not meaningful. And I'm going to give some examples of this. So obviously the BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation, is a global level news service, and it has its breaking news Twitter feed. And if we were working for a client and we got a positive story onto this Twitter feed, and we were working in PR and comms, we would feel that that was a great achievement and something that we wanted to do. And if we were then thinking, how would we measure it? Well, we might look at it and we might say, you know, the breaking news feed here, it's got 21.2 million followers. So we might be tempted to say that the impressions or the reach or the OTS of this one particular tweet was 21.2 million. But of course, we all know that that number would not be right. Why? Well, first of all, not everybody who follows the feed will have seen it, because it depends on the time of day that the tweet goes out. It depends on relevance as well. In fact, if you look at, you can use some tools to look at how many followers are genuine and how many are not genuine. You can see here that of those 21.2 million, at the time I did this, at least 6% of the followers are fake accounts. 70% are just inactive, so these are the lurkers who are highly likely not to have seen it, and only 24% are good. So even on with that data, we might say, well, let's even just take the good. So perhaps if we took the good, a quarter of 21 million, let's call it 5 million, perhaps we might be tempted to say, well, we think this got 5 million opportunities to see. Notice I said the word think. We're now having to guess. In fact, if you look at Twitter analytics and the research that Twitter makes available, and all of us can look at our own Twitter feed, you go to analytics.twitter.com to get your own feed, and you'll find that most tweets actually only get exposed, and that doesn't even mean they were seen, by about 3% of your audience. Your very best tweets, it's maybe 10%. And it totally depends, frankly, on how good you are at tweeting and how relevant it was and things like that. So we know there's a spread of between 3 and 10, so we could have a guess at that. But of course, we are doing exactly what I said. Again, we're just guessing. And I want to throw in some other spanners, if you like, into the works of impressions and opportunities to see. We work so hard as PR professionals to get our content out there. Everyone talks about content marketing. But did you know that, on average, only 60% of people do not read beyond the picture and the headline? So it doesn't matter how good your content is. These people are just reading the headline. How can you measure the content and say that it's had this impression number? It's another reason why these numbers are spurious. As we think about digital media, Google's released some data that says that 61% of traffic on the internet is not human. So a load of these hits and visits to your content is coming from machines, scrapers and crawlers, things like that, which aren't reading it. We all know that you've got spam accounts, you've got Twitter accounts, you've got bots, you can buy likes, shares, retweets, and you can buy them for dollars. So all of these numbers can be gamed and they can be cheated. And then, of course, a lot of publishers and bloggers, for example, they don't publish their viewing numbers and their readership numbers. Even the national papers, who have huge variation between the different sections of their content online, don't be fully transparent about how many people actually went to their site. So all we are doing is estimating to ever more inaccurate levels if we rely on one of these key metrics that we've relied on in the past, impressions. We know, Marion mentioned it, about Facebook views. So Facebook counts a view as 3 seconds of one of their videos. They launch them by default. So how many times has someone been, have we all been on Facebook and a video starts playing, and you think, I'm not even interested in it, but you've just been counted for an advertiser as a relevant view, and the sound doesn't play either. I mean, it's ludicrous. And YouTube and Google, with all the problems that they've had, and so now even the publishers themselves are saying this. This is just some recent headlines. How fake are your Twitter followers? US Today's parent company has asked the FBI to investigate a rise in fake Facebook followers. And in the Wall Street Journal, Facebook overestimated its key video metric for 2 years. And this is why one of the speakers was earlier talking about, I think it was over here from AMEC, about Mark Pritchard, who is the head of marketing at Procter & Gamble, has issued this challenge to the industry to sort its metrics out, because our clients are realizing that the numbers that we're providing, if we just focus on these output metrics, are losing their meaning and their relevance. So this was the context that this framework was launched in. And if you rely, and here's a nice little warning, if you rely on those automated numbers and just counting the stuff that's easy to count, things like this can happen. So this person here is Britain's most influential man on Twitter, apparently. Now, he's actually, anyone know who he is? He's Liam Payne of One Direction. So he's not even the good-looking one. He's the other one. But apparently, he is Britain's most influential person. Now, with Jim talking to us about the Scottish referendum, the Brexit, the upcoming general election, do we really think this guy's the most influential person on Twitter? Answer no. Now, the good news is, so the reason I say he is because one of these automated platforms did a bit of its own PR and announced it, and actually the Daily Telegraph picked it up as a story. But the good news is that even Liam Payne doesn't think he is, and he tweeted this. He said, I've just read it, and I can't believe it. How can this even happen? If I'm influential, the world's in trouble. Except, what I really like is he misspelt it, and he said the word's in trouble, which I think is even more appropriate, right? Okay, so that's the context that we were launching this framework in. PR and communications, as we know, is changing. People are working across paid, earned, shared, and owned. These output metrics, that content analysis, which most of our businesses have their legacy and their history in, are losing their relevance and their meaning. Doesn't mean that we throw them away. We don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, but they're losing their meaning. If we're going to be credible advisors to our clients and maintain relevance as an industry, we've got to move on from just doing content analysis and counting outputs on their own. So we've got to move to proving value by looking at the outcomes and the outtakes. So how does it work? Because people go, oh God, it must be so complicated. Well, the good news is the more things have changed, the more they stay the same. And this is basically a slide that Paul and I used to use at Metrica about 20 years ago. Okay, so we started in Metrica in 1996 together. What are we now? 2017. So it's 21 years. This would have been from about 20 years ago. Nothing has changed, guys. What are we trying to do? What's communications, PR professionals, what are they trying to do? They're trying to get the right message to the right audience to achieve an objective. And I think, Fritz, you were talking about the importance of audiences rather than key media yesterday. And that's absolutely right. I've heard that thing come up a couple of times at the conference. It's got to be audience first, not media first. Where is that relevant audience? But nothing, that's the bit that's got different. difficult, if you like, is the audience is fragmented. But the approach has remained the same. We're trying to get the right message to the right audience to achieve an objective. And that bit is the critical bit. So what do we mean by achieve an objective? Well, no marketing director or head of comms says to his team, and Fritz will back me up on this, do you say to your team, go out and get me 50 likes and 32 new followers? Of course not. He wants to promote his we had that great case study with the Platinum card, and he wants to drive it through to sales and new users of the Platinum card. All of our clients want some tangible change to happen. And that change might be a purchase, but it might be a change in a mindset as well. So some of the language that we use as an industry is now on the screen, and I thought it useful just to pop it up there again. So we've got outputs, outtakes, and outcomes, which are basically what Marion called the what, the so what, and the show me the money. So you can replace those words there with the what, the so what, and the show me the money. So the outputs is where we do our content analysis. You know, people have generated the content, the social conversations have happened, and we count that stuff, because we have to count that stuff. We don't throw it away. I think of it as the digital breadcrumbs that lead us on the journey, but we have to go further. So the outputs is where that stuff goes, the what. The outtakes, well, look, having read, seen, heard this content that's being generated, this work that we've done, what do our stakeholders now think? What do they think? Have we changed their mind? Have we educated them? Have we informed them? And then the outcome, and often with organizations which are looking to drive sales, is have they bought something? So this is the show me the money. And these two areas on the right are where our clients care. And the challenge that most measurement businesses face up until recently is that the metrics they provide are all over on the left. And the business doesn't care. And they're caring less and less because those metrics are all being shown to have terrible problems. We have to move from the left, perhaps look at ratios. You know, the concept of an accurate absolute number is dying. And we heard yesterday in the conference that it's not about how big the number is, but it's about the ratio and the difference between those numbers. And I think that was a really key point. So we've got to move from the outtakes to from the outputs, the outtakes, to the outcomes. And we've got to do that in this new world where our clients are working across paid, earned, shared, and owned. So that was the situation that we found ourselves in the work that we did on the launch of the framework. And as I mentioned, then we launched it last year, and we've had fantastic take-up. So from the global survey that we released at the conference, I thought this was a nice highlight. This is broken down by region of our members, of who's aware of the conference. And you can see it's almost universal, but of course in the Asia-Pacific region, it's still high, but it's not as high as we'd like. That's why we're here, guys. We're here to help ignite this region. And John has just smiled at me, which has put me off. But thank you, Jonna, for that. Yes, ignite is my new word of the conference, by the way, and I got it from Jonna on day one. So there we are. We're here to ignite this region with Jonna Burke's help, and to help it not make the mistakes that the rest of the world made for many of the years that Paul and I have worked together, but to come in at this more sophisticated level already. And in fact, if you aggregate that all together, 77% of our members are already either using it or planning to use the framework today already. Most of them are already using it. And what was nice was when I looked at why they're using it, some of the comments that they came up with, I grouped it with some human analysis by me into themes. And the themes were that people found it a very useful educational resource internally. The word useful came up. If I did my own little word cloud, useful would have been the biggest one. It was easy to use. It's seen as independent and therefore credible, and that was critical for people. They said it gives me credibility to go into the organization and be that expert that can talk about how to measure communications, how to deliver insights, all those things that we know we need to move our businesses towards with this credible third-party approach. And we built the framework with a small team of dedicated people. Paul was one, John helped, Professor Jim McNamara helped, and some other people as well. But a small group of very experienced in-house people, academics, PR agency representatives, and measurement company representatives. We all came together and we spent a huge amount of time putting it together. And it has been massively widely accepted and adopted. It's being taught on university courses now. It's being built into CPD courses. The feedback that I get from people who say, this has taken the scales off our eyes, it's made what seemed impenetrable make total sense, is phenomenal. So I urge you all to use it. So, where is it? What do I do? And here it is. So, this is what you see. I want to highlight, I'm not going to use the laser because someone was using the laser in one of the sessions I was in the other day and I nearly got blinded, so I'm not going to threaten you all with the laser. But if you see under the word Barcelona Principles, you can see all those flags, and they represent the different languages that we've already translated it into. It's in Thai, I think it's in Chinese, it's in a whole load of other languages as well. If your language is not there, please come forward, not now, but please drop Barry or me an email, and we will, with your help, if you translate it for us, we will host it in your language because we want to drive adoption of this best practice advice in your region and support you to succeed. So if your language isn't there, then let us know. But I think you'll find that most languages are. So where is it? And you can see the screen grab I've used deliberately is, there it is in Thai. So I hope my Thai colleagues in the room are not going to say that doesn't make sense, because I can't read Thai, but it should be in perfect Thai there. And thank you to the company that supported us for that. So where do I go? You go there, amec.org.com/AMEC Framework. And I'll leave that up for a few moments. That is the URL. If you have been to this URL before, then as of today, I would like you to clear your cache and then reload it. Why? Because as of today, we have launched new functionality. So what you do now, when you get there, is it gives you the opportunity to register and then log in. And once you've done that, you then have the ability to save your progress, save your work, and you can have up to 10 different frameworks at any one time in a really intuitive, easy to use file management system. I mean, you can't go wrong with it. It's been beautifully designed. And the concept is, perhaps, let's assume Amex is a client, giving us more money, we heard, didn't we, Marion? Was it more money we heard? I think it was. And we're going to do a case study for Amex. We might say, right, let's sit down first of all, and let's set our objectives and our targets, and we'll create a planning document. This is where measurement starts, guys. Don't forget this. It starts at the end by thinking about, what am I trying to achieve? And that's when you help your client come up with a proper plan. And then only when you got the plan and you said what success would look like, should you then go about doing the measurement to see whether you succeeded. Measurement should not be an afterthought. It's not, can you measure my campaign? Just measure it for me. That doesn't wash. What were you trying to achieve? And that was, in many ways, I think, the lady who asked the question to Carly, that was the challenge that's going on there. And why Carly was saying it's more expensive at Isentia to have not just an easy AVE, which is a default number that obviously comes out of the Isentia system, but the reason it costs more money is because Carly and her team have to understand what that client was looking to achieve, and then they have to code appropriately against it. But that's the question that we have to ask. And so in the framework, you set your plan as one framework, and then you measure it, and perhaps you save that as a second one. So here it is. This is what it looks like. It's been designed to be really simple and easy to use. So you can see nice, it looks like a sort of Windows 10 tiles, and it is clearly a step-through process. So you start with number 1 and you work your way through to number 7. So number 1 is the objectives, and when you click on it, the whole thing's interactive. Okay, so you click on it, and it will open up. And what you see here are organizational objectives, which is where most communications plans should start, because we have to link what we're trying to do with what the organization is trying to do. Then we map our communications objectives, which are the ones in the box below, to the organizational objectives. And then if I go back, you can see that having done that, we'd go to inputs, where the formative research that Jim was talking about that was so critical in Brexit should happen. We capture the activity that we've done under number 3, and then those buckets, the what, the so what, the show me the money, the outputs, the outtakes, the outcomes, and then ultimately the organizational impact. So every step of that process, you click on it, additional windows open, and what you'll see is under the additional windows, it guides you and tells you what you should be doing in each step. And if you're still confused, you click the little I, and by clicking the little I, you see a further window pops open that tells you what. And on each further window, it even then suggests and prompts you, and you can see it says, for further information, click here. For the sake of time, I'm not going to do that, but you can click there, and a whole extra resource opens up, which comes from this thing called the measurement taxonomy, which Professor McNamara created for AMEC, and has donated to us to use for the framework. It's available on the framework's microsite. The framework itself is on a microsite within the AMEC site, and it has a huge amount of resource that answers basically every measurement question that you can think of. So do go and take a look, and we thank Jim for the taxonomy. So I'm not going to take you through it further, but what you end up with, if I just go back one, is once you've gone through all of those levels, you can save as you're going along now that we have this login functionality. But when you hit submit, it will write it all out for you into a beautifully formatted document that becomes what I like to call your measurement plan. And then our challenge then is we operationalize it with the metrics of our own businesses, which is fine. And our challenge then, and we heard this being talked about today as well, is we then tell the measurement story. It's not okay just to bung some charts and some data and some numbers. Tell the measurement story. We put it in context. Jim again talked to us about the importance of context in measurement. We have to put all of this stuff into context, tell the measurement story. So I'm going to hand over to Paul, who's now going to show us how, with a couple of his clients, which I think have both won gold awards at AMEC conferences, they have so successfully built strong relationships with the clients and told the measurement story using this process. Paul.
Thank you, Richard. So, absolute pleasure to be here, and it's fantastic to be able to be back on stage with Richard after all this time. Before I talk about these two case studies, I just want to make two very quick points about why the framework's really important to me. And Richard mentioned this point around internal use. And so when Richard and I started our own business, it was the two of us. So when we wanted to agree kind of what best practice would look like or what our methodology was, it was, Richard, shall we do this? And you said, yes, let's do it. And our organizations have changed massively. So within Cision now, I think we have 3,000 employees. So the ability to have something that's got a common language and a common framework and it's an accepted standard is fantastic to be able to train all those individuals so that we're all singing from the same hymn sheet. It's also fantastic both internally and externally as a tool with clients. So those clients that are obsessed with just basic output metrics, as Richard mentioned, to encourage them to go through this process of really understanding what objectives and communications are about, and then developing the measurement around that. And one of the best ways I've found with both educating an internal audience and educating an external audience in terms of clients is to bring the framework to life by taking them through relevant examples of what we've done potentially with other clients. So I wanted to do that briefly now. The first one is Slimming World. which is now feeling very relevant given that Richard and I have been at the back and John has been feeding us chocolates all morning. So I think we may both well be joining Slimming World on our way back to London. So Slimming World is one of the two major slimming kind of club organisations in the UK. And I was speaking to Diane from City last night, and we were saying how huge the slimming industry has become. So it's big business, there's lots of money at stake. But there's a huge societal benefit to this as well, which is that big challenge with people being overweight and obese. In the UK, and this is true in other parts of the world, more than half of women are overweight. And while us men might feel smug about that, it's 2/3 of men are either overweight or obese. and pets, yes, including my dog. The NHS believes that the cost, just in terms of healthcare, will reach 10 billion by 2015, and the broader societal costs are estimated to be around 50 billion. So this is a big deal. Not surprisingly, the biggest time to sign up to a slimming club like Weight Watchers or Slimming World is January. So after everyone's indulged over Christmas. So the big campaign that Slimming World tends to run is over the Christmas period. And I'm going to talk to you about the Dream Weight campaign. So the important thing, as Rich has mentioned, is not doing this after the event, it's doing it before the event and thinking about the planning. So we'd develop the framework with our client at Slimming World, and we would obviously start with the objectives. And the organisational objectives here are fairly self-explanatory: to help as many people achieve their dream weight, to become the world's leading authority on weight management, and to build success through customer delight. So it's lots of word of mouth, and people having successful experiences really helps to generate new people joining. In terms of how that translates into the communications objectives, we heard a lot yesterday about the customer journey, and so we developed the customer journey here, where we need to get people, first of all, to be aware that Slimming World exists, then to increase an understanding of what they do, the benefit they bring, this association with achieving your dream weight, getting people to really consider using Slimming World as their club of choice, and then eventually, obviously, then signing up and becoming a member of the club. The stat I mentioned earlier on about men and women was actually really important because traditionally women have tended to be more predominant in using slimming clubs. And this was a real opportunity to increase the number of men that were joining. So the idea was to reach out to all people, including women and men. The strategy behind this was that they did a piece of research with with the Human Nutrition and Dietetics organisation, and this research showed that, slightly counterintuitively, so most people think that if you want to lose weight, it's best to have a modest goal, and then you're more likely to achieve it. And this research actually showed the opposite was true. If you have a big statement, a big goal, a dream weight, you might not hit the dream weight, but you're actually more likely to lose more weight as a result. So to leverage that research and to have examples of people that have done well. So they created a Mr. Sleek and Miss Slinky, and I'll let you decide which of Richard and I are Mr. Sleek and Miss Slinky. And then to do deals with various target publications to do healthy recipes and to have promotions, including free membership offers. Okay, to Marion's what, so what, and show me the money. Outcomes, outtakes, and outcomes. And I think there's an important point here about outcomes. And I think it's important that outputs particularly are measured in context. So there's a danger that we go, oh, you shouldn't measure outputs anymore, we should just go straight to outcomes. But it's actually building the stepping stones, it's building the kind of points of evidence and the correlations between all of them that's important to help demonstrate that journey. In terms of outcomes, 600 articles.
Outputs. There's a typo. We've just got, so apologies for the typo on the deck, but it should say outputs then. First box, number 4.
Apologies, yes, outputs. 600 articles, well that doesn't mean anything, does it? So let's take some further context. Well, we've reached, to Richard's caveat about reach metrics, a potential audience of 66% of adults in the UK. Well, specifically in terms of men, well, we've actually done quite well because we've increased the targeting to men and increased the reach to 67%. Most of the coverage has delivered a key message, a significant portion of coverage has delivered a spokesperson, and a significant portion of coverage has featured a call to action, trying to get people to go to the website, which is the primary vehicle to get people to look for clubs and to sign up. So pre and post the campaign, we ran some surveys to look at this whole kind of level of awareness and how people considered Slimming World. So it turned out that awareness wasn't a problem. 90% of people had actually heard of Slimming World even before the campaign. So it was actually the further steps along the journey. We actually asked people whether they'd read about Slimming World as part of this campaign. 74% of people said they had. 54% said they'd read positive things. People with a very good knowledge or good knowledge of Slimming World increased to 35% from 27%. People saying that they had a positive reputation also increased, and the biggest increase was amongst men, who went from the minority to the majority, and a big increase in people saying that they were actively considering using Slimming World to lose weight. But that's another step in the journey. But of course, the ultimate thing is, well, are we actually achieving what we want to achieve here in terms of getting people to go to the website and sign up? So when we bring in website analytics, we can then see, well, actually, we're doubling our traffic on the website. We can see a peak in coverage around the 19th of December, which is when the story broke. We can then see on that particular day the conversion rate in terms of people going to the website and then signing up to a club is the highest it has been by a considerable number. And then we can see how individual stories then play out in terms of driving that traffic. And the good news is that there's been almost 20% increase in the year-on-year in the number of new members joining. So in terms of impact, well, let's go through the process. We've got a positive reputation. We've seen an increase in that. We've seen an increase in people considering Slimming World. We've got a record number of website sessions. We've got a record number of conversions. We've got a record number of new members joining. But also, I mean, impact is not just about have we hit the bottom line. It's also about are we learning stuff? When we do this campaign again, are we going to be better in the future? So we've identified the right types of media to achieve these objectives, what works and what doesn't. And as Richard mentioned earlier on, that's the final evaluation framework that would come out of the website. In terms of just feedback from the client, this is Jenny, who's the head of external affairs, who's talking about the importance of January and how competitive it is, and by measuring changes in brand recognition and reputation, tracking website visits and signups, and linking all of this data together, you're able to understand how that message is resonating and influencing the impact of communications. And I think what's really important is then those learnings are being taken forward for their future campaigns.
So I think what the guys did so well was take that all together and tell a compelling measurement story. And that's what the framework enables them to do. And Paul, wasn't this a gold winner last night?
So this was a gold winner last night for best use of a framework.
And wasn't it a gold winner last year as well? Was this a gold
No.
winner last year? Okay, so this will be a case study on the AMEC website. Paul has got another example, but we've got 6 minutes left, and obviously it's lunch next. So perhaps we'll pause there, and we'll go to you guys and look for questions and feedback, and we've got a number. So thank you. Yes, please. Start wherever you'd like, and go around the room, please.
Was there anything you removed? Was there anything you removed in this version of the framework or simplified because it was causing problems before?
I've simplified some explanatory language, but the framework, Jim McNamara has a session after lunch, I believe, where he's going to be talking about frameworks, and he'll explain a lot more about how this framework came to be. And for the sake of time, I won't do that, but please go to Jim's, or Jim's going to just jump in at that point quickly.
So just now you mentioned after your framework, the 7 steps, I noticed you have a submit button. So after you click the submit button, all these materials submit to the AMEC, and you give the evaluation?
Yes, that's a good question. What the submit button does is it sends it to create a PDF. So it creates that, if we go back one slide, please, Paul, if you've got the beeper.
Yeah.
The submit button creates that for you. So what this isn't is a tool to replace measurement vendors. It doesn't provide the metrics for you, but it is a framework. It is a way of pulling everything together into a coherent approach that allows you to tell that measurement story. You need to get the metrics yourself. And many of these metrics are available from AMEC members. Many of them are available within your organization already as well. You'll find that you have to talk to your web analytics guys, talk to your marketing guys, and you'll be able to get this kind of stuff. And can we just go to Jim McNamara, who wanted just to pick up on the point? Sorry, sir, and then we'll come straight back to you.
When you went through, you under outputs or under activities, you reported on your previous research. So I think you got a 29% awareness and there was only 22. That previous research, just a comment question, should that not be under inputs? Because that drives the point that at the input level, baseline data, formative research, pre-testing, that needs to be emphasized. And I think you had it there, but it was in the wrong box.
Yes, and so from a purist point of view, you're absolutely spot on. In terms of how this actually worked with the client, we developed the framework at the same time as developing what the methodology was, and then we did the pre-campaign research, and that's then literally just as the campaign was launching. So it in a sense, it came too late to fit into the input side, but you're absolutely right, you probably should have done that further in advance.
And on that point, I would caution us all not to get too hung up. Jim will probably hate me saying this, but there's purity and there's good enough, and let's start with good enough and work towards purity. So if you're confused about is something an outcome or a business impact, don't let that stop you using it. If you feel that one of the boxes perhaps could be merged with another one, merge it. It's a tool, it's an approach for you to use to take you on the journey to better measurement.
So I think my question is also related to that, because we were told that we need to use that before the campaign started, so we fill in all the objectives.
Well, that you can to set your targets.
But it's like more like a dynamic process. So because some of the data must be achieved after the event or the campaign was held. So it's like a dynamic process. We fill in each steps, after we achieve certain kind of achievements already.
You can do that, yeah. Or you can use it to set your targets and then go back and say, how did we do against the targets? Or you can create 2. I mean, it's up to you. It's a resource for everybody here to use as they see most appropriate, but whatever would work for you and your organization. There's a question at the back. Yep.
I love what you've done with the campaign, and I know that it wasn't sort of detailed there, but some of the research you use for the audience targeting sort of feeds into that as well. The question is, there's a lot of clients, smaller clients, that don't have the budget for those other pieces of research and for that sort of targeting research and that sort of thing. What sort of advice would you give on what sort of other measurements and inputs we can use alongside the media measurement?
That's a very good question, and it's actually a shame that we ran out of time to go to the next case study, which was the Stroke Association. And the Stroke Association and Anil talked in London last year. They're a very small organisation, they have a very small budget, and yet they take measurement very seriously. And there we go. So actually, if you go back one to Richard, if you go to the blue ones, the outputs, outtakes, and outcomes, or outcomes, outtakes, and outcomes. It was actually a fairly straightforward piece of research. We did some basic measurement of the media coverage. We did some basic measurement of social media, especially the use of a hashtag. The whole point was to get people to go and to sign an online petition. So they then could set up the website analytics to be able to measure that. That didn't cost very much. We ran a survey. That was actually quite a cheap survey. That cost a few £100s to run. And then obviously you can get the outcomes as a result of that. So all in all, that was not a particularly expensive piece of research.
Yeah. And we'll correct the typo on, just remember number 4 there should say outputs, but before the deck will be available to download, you'll be able to read it easily. Was there a question at the back? Yes, this gentleman, we must be quick, so.
Right. So just, we've been using for the last year for absolutely every one of our clients, the framework. So I wanted to know about your experience because something has happened to us and we had to move it out to an Excel sheet because they are expecting some sort of causality between outcomes, outtakes, and outputs. Has that worked for you? This is kind of a list rather than a table with causality. So the 2 questions are, have you had a similar experience? And the second, would the framework go into this direction? And just a follow up on that is, would the framework evolve so we can actually do evolution of progress? Can we say, are we doing progress, and could this tool in the future show us that progress and help us show the client this progress?
Yes, so I think there's two parts there. So the first part is, I think Richard's made this point earlier on, it doesn't do the work for you, right? It creates the framework, it tells you how to tell the story, but you have to do the work. So if you want to look at correlations between outputs, outtakes, and outcomes, you are going to have to measure it and you are going to have to use tools. It can be Excel, it can be basic tools to be able to show that. In terms of measuring progress, the great advantage now, because you can save it, is that you can save a campaign and then come back to that campaign. Let's say with the Stroke Association, they do the same campaign every year. You can then come out and look at the results from the previous year and then compare it against the next year and see if you're making progress.
Yeah. There's a question, lady at the back.
Not so much a question, but just feedback. I think this is a great example, and the changes that have been made to the framework based on all of the feedback. It's a wonderful evolutionary progress, so well done everyone who worked on that and who's making that possible. And I think having a testament of someone who's already used it here in the audience should encourage everyone to apply the taxonomy and at least use this as a starting point to have better and deeper conversations with your clients. So well done.
Thank you, John. 10-second comment from Jim McNamara.
Sorry, it's just some of the questions, lack of time. I'm in my workshop going through the taxonomy and pointing out some of the methods, low cost to medium cost to high cost, that can be applied. So I will be going through the taxonomy. So there's a plug for another workshop, but it does answer some of those questions.
And I think we need to wrap up because it's now lunch. I would say, I'm biased of course, but I would say that this is a resource that will help you, and here's that word again, ignite measurement in a meaningful and credible way across this region. I really urge you to use it. Where it's been used everywhere, it has worked incredibly well to help improve the status of what we're talking about. Remember those comments I read out from feedback from the people who are already using it to help build their credibility, easy to use, and all of those things. And if you want proof, Cision and Paul's business won 4 or 5 goals last night. Is that right? 6 goals last night. And each of them used this approach. Prime Research won 3 goals last night and a Platinum Award. It used this approach. This is an approach, and what we've done is build you a tool to bring it to life so that you can give it to your staff. It will help educate them. This is our #1 challenge. We spend 60% of our budget on education. This is an educational tool to educate your clients and your staff and help improve the quality of measurement in the region. So please do use it. And my final comment is, if your language, just a reminder, if your language isn't there and you'd like it, please speak to Barry and me and we'll work with you. If you can help us translate it, we will host it for free in your language to help you in your region. So on that note, enjoy your lunch. Thank you very much.